Alright, so this video is going to go through creating camera views and materials. Basically kind of getting you set up to do a render. So jump in, you can find your camera under your view tab here. Basically you want to be in a floor plan view when you first kind of set your camera up. And your first click kind of sets the location of the camera, and then your next click is going to set kind of where you want to point it. And as far as how far you kind of stretch this is going to determine your far clipping plane. So if I only did it to here, I wouldn't see all the way to this back wall, but if I did it here, then I know I went all the way through it. I'm going to set up my view here so I see a little bit of that interior wall. I'm just going to click, and you'll see it sort of jumps me into that view. A few things I might quickly do here is you can control kind of the overall window here with these points here, and this is something you can only really do graphically. There's not any like sort of properties you can do. But if we jump over to the properties here, there's a few important things to note. So one of the things is that far clip offset. So if, for example, if I had just set this to like 20 feet, I would only see kind of up to that door roughly. So either you can play around with this, but either you want to set it pretty far. Another thing that is probably simpler to do is just to deactivate it. For most purposes, you don't really want it. There might be some cases where you'll want it. A few other things to note: this eye elevation and target elevation. So this is just kind of places you at around the height of a human. So this this is basically we're on the 4th floor, so it's roughly, I think it's like 5'6" above our floor level. So if you wanted to change your perspective and look at it from sort of higher up in the space, you can do something like this, and you'll be looking down through the space or something. And then your target elevation is just kind of like where the level of that point is. And that's the same point that you see in the floor plan. That's basically this point here where that elevation is. Okay, so another thing you'll notice is that here it automatically names a view for you. I like to rename these, just keep organized. So let's say you do something like that. And maybe I'll make this a little bit wider. Another thing to note is that it's a little bit, there's this wheel here, the full navigation wheel. There's a few things that are useful in here. It's sometimes a little bit of a pain to use, but if I wanted to, let's say I panned around here and then I wanted to go back to the view that I had before, I hit rewind and it'll take me back sort of like one movement. And you can orbit and zoom, etc. And then another thing that's a little bit hidden is this decrease focal length. So this is kind of like setting your camera focal length. And you can't really set it to an exact number, but you can kind of zoom in and out. So this would be like a wider lens, this would be a more zoomed lens. So that's something that's probably useful. It's hidden pretty deep into Revit for whatever reason. But yeah, so that's the idea with the camera. Cameras also have a section box that you can use if you're doing, say, like a perspective section. So let's say, for example, I wanted to, let's create a new view. So I'll go back to my level 4, and I have this section here through the stair, and I wanted to create a perspective section through that would align up with that section. And another cool thing you can do is you can kind of then like export the perspective section and export that section and kind of overlap them, in Photoshop or something if you wanted to. So this view, I'm just gonna put it somewhere around here, and I'm just gonna point it out, and I'll orient it in a second. I'll show you how. So if we want to make sure that the camera is pointed exactly in the same direction as that section, which is perpendicular to the building, you can do orient to view, and then select the section that you're aligning it to. So it'll just kind of align it a little bit better to how you're pointed. And now obviously we're kind of, cutting through this, but we're really kind of zoomed in, so it's a very sort of distorted view. So this would be a good example of when you would want to change your focal length. And we'll also, right now we don't have the section box on, so let's do that first. So with the section box, you'll see you can do this, and then it'll kind of give you these, the ability to kind of move the section box around in this view. It's probably easier to control in a plan view. So you'll see here, this is my section box of the camera, and I'm going to just sort of eyeball this and align it to that view, that section. And I'll bring this in. And then I'll jump back. I'm going to rename this. Right. So now you can sort of see I'm cutting through that stair. And what I'll do is I'm going to make my focal length really small. Alright, so I'm going to zoom out here. And another thing I'll probably want to do so I'll probably also increase this. There we go. That seems a little bit more reasonable. So it's obviously very distorted. We're working with a sort of a 21-story tower here, so it's going to be distorted as you move up, but maybe you want that. You can kind of play that up if you wanted to later on, if you're tweaking the drawing and you want to make this kind of cool view that gets really kind of distorted as when you go farther away from that camera. It could be kind of a cool effect. So that's that. As far as applying materials, let's jump back to our first view. So the material editor, so if we just come down here and do a realistic view, you can kind of see there's some default materials that we have here. We haven't really messed around at all with materials yet. So let's apply like a wallpaper or something here. So if we come into manage, you have our materials editor here. And so you'll see we haven't really done anything too much with materials yet. So we have all the defaults. So let's see if there's like some sort of, all right, we'll just bring this paper material in. I'm just going to duplicate it. And I'm going to rename, I'll just call it wallpaper 1. So now what I just did was I created a new material, and it has all these properties here. Generally, I don't really use sort of ignore physical and thermal. These are kind of the 3 important ones. Identity, which you don't really, once you rename it, it kind of knows. So you don't really have to do much with that. Graphics, I like to check these render appearance so that when I'm in a shaded view, I can kind of see roughly what color I'm going to be having in the render. And the last thing that's important is appearance. So a common kind of confusion around this is that appearance belongs to the material directly in a way, rather that it's sort of part of the material, let's just say. Actually, appearance is its own thing in a way. So this paper material right now, you see this cardboard chipboard appearance. These are both referencing the same appearance. There's 0 difference. Think of it as a totally separate kind of file in a way. So now if I wanted to create a new appearance that that will apply to this wallpaper one material, I can, I can just duplicate this old one, and then I'll come into the information of this, and I can change this to wallpaper. And I could, change the description. I'm going to use like a leaf pattern. So now I'll come here, and if you hit this drop down here, you'll see you'll have some options here. I'm going to basically be providing an image, or I have to come to edit image. By default, it has this image here. And so I'm going to change this. I'm going to go, I kind of set up this material already. Kind of go on and find, this could be a JPEG or a PNG bitmap. So you find whatever material you want. I'm going to say, this scale-wise, this looks pretty good. So I could just leave it. If I wanted to, I can, you can change these, and that'll basically kind of adjust the scale of the pattern. So we'll just say okay, it looks pretty good. And then there's like other things you might want to do. Right now I'm just going to leave that, but you can, if you're doing something that's more of a texture like a concrete or a brick or something, you might want to use like a bump, an image for the bump. In this case I'm just going to leave it. Alright, so that's kind of, I've set up my wallpaper material now, and I'm going to apply it to this wall here. So this is a basic gyp wall. I'm going to edit it, duplicate it, and I'm going to say interior 5-inch wallpaper. And then I'm going to edit this so that my material inside my wall assembly is that material that I just made. So let's see. So I'll apply that. And the same thing, just in case I don't know which side is interior, exterior, so I'll just make it dummy proof and put it on both. Alright, so I'm just going to leave that. I can go around and play around a little bit more if I wanted to, but it seems, just for the sake of the demonstration, you get the idea here. So now you have your material in, and since we're in a realistic view, we can kind of see what the scale of that will look like roughly. And so the next step, if you were to kind of be doing a render, would be come in here and do a render. I don't have any lights or anything set up in here, so this is going to be a terrible render. But you can, obviously that's kind of up to you. You can put some lights in and things like that, and you can set, your sky settings, and there's not a lot you can really do compared to some other rendering software, so you're pretty limited. But if you just want something basic, it's a pretty easy to use solid render. So let's just see what this looks like. And then the other thing you can do is you can kind of adjust exposure and things after the fact. So this is just a draft view. So obviously this is terrible because I don't have any lighting in here. But I just kind of want to explain one feature here. In the image, you can either save it to a project or export it. So export as obviously you're exporting to a separate file. Save to project, let's just adjust the exposure because it's driving me a little bit crazy. Right, that wasn't that much better. Anyway, all right. So you can do that there, and then if I wanted to say put this onto a sheet or something, I can do a save to project. I'm just going to leave that name, and then I'll hit close, and I should see here in renderings. Now I have that render view. that I can then drag onto a sheet or whatever. So this is obviously really bad. It was a drafting view, but you get the idea. All right, we'll leave it at that.